LGR's Talking Property is brought to you in association with the Kings Group, your local high street property business that delivers on results and service. We'll get you moving. The views and opinions expressed on LGR's Talking Property are those of the host, guests and contributors and are not necessarily those of London Greek Radio. While all facts, figures and statistics are carefully researched, listeners should check before taking any action based on information and advice offered in this programme. LGR's Talking Property with Karl Knipe.
Well, a very good evening and welcome to LGR's Talking Property, the monthly live and often lively discussion on all things property. We've been off air holidaying for 2 months, as I'm sure most of you have for the summer, and I'm sure you are all like my guest this evening, sprightly, refreshed, bushy-tailed and raring to go. Gentlemen. In tonight's programme we are looking at what can property and housing expect from a Boris government. That said, I'm not sure how long this present government is going to last. Days perhaps, weeks, who knows. Times like this, I recall the Harold Wilson quote, "A week is a long time in politics." I think 48 hours is, gentlemen, at this moment in time. So it's amazing how time flies on from 40 years ago from that quote. Now, Boris has been the UK's Prime Minister for just 42 days, and it seems he's made more promises in this time than just about any other Prime Minister before him. Perhaps with an election in mind, he's been campaigning from day one. Funnily enough, though, he's been a little shy, it would seem, in announcements concerning the property and housing world. What's wrong with property and housing, Boris? I hear you all ask. Well, quite a lot, according to many, and tonight I have with me two guests who are pumped up, revved up and roaring to tell us what they think is wrong and where the PM can and should be heading. We're going to look at the lack of building of homes of any sort, never mind affordable ones. Landlords are exiting the property sector in their droves. Should they, or does Boris need to flip-flop on Section 21 and reverse the course of this all-out attack on landlord exodus? We'll look at stamp duty and try to fit in a few other important areas along the way. As always, there'll be many of you out there intensely listening to my guests' expert viewpoints and thoughts. Let's hear from you with your questions, worries or concerns about anything in the property sector. What direction do our guests this evening believe the next interest rate movement will be? Will property prices fall or zoom potentially under a Boris-led government? Text us this evening on 0737 66 11033. Messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property or email studio@lgr.co.uk. Ask away. In the next hour we want to hear from you. It's your programme. This is your chance to voice your questions, concerns or just comment on the debate. With me this evening to try and make sense of all of this are our expert guests as always. Firstly, he's been called the Dominic Cummings of the property world. Well, he was just as hated or admired in his previous role at eMove as is today the PM Special Advisor, Mr. Cummings. Russell Quirk is a 25-year-old veteran.
25-year-old's fine.
You don't look a day over 30, Russell, I'll tell you.
He's a 25-year veteran of estate agency, both traditional and online. To quote an article from Estate Agency Today, the former founder of eMove has resuscitated his career as a public relations man, property guru and pro-Brexit commentator. Russell can often be heard on various radio stations giving his opinion on all things property related, and these days he has co-founded Propaganda, a PR agency that's flying high. A very warm Talking Property welcome to you, Russell.
Good evening. What an intro, thank you.
Oh,
don't know about the Donald Cummings bit, but
no. Well,
slightly controversial.
Slightly. I believe you might be coming back into the day-to-day estate agency, so maybe you might want to whet our appetite a little bit on that.
How on earth have you heard that, Carl? Look, I've been in agency, as you referred to, for 25 years, really. My dad was an estate agent. My grandfather was an estate agent here in London. So I've been out of it after the kind of demise of eMove for 9 months. And I think, look, if anybody thought that, despite my kind of foray into PR, which is going pretty well, I have to say, if anyone thought that I was going to stay out of estate agency now for the rest of my career, they would be very, very sadly mistaken. So let's just say there's an announcement very, very soon in terms of my next endeavour, in addition to the PR, I have to say.
God dear me, it's all happening this week, isn't it? Remember, you can text us on 0737 66 11033, message us on Twitter at LGR Talk Property, or email studio@lgr.co.uk with any questions for Russell and our next guest this evening. It's a big, warm welcome return to the programme to Paul Shamplina. Now, Paul spent more than 25 years helping landlords with tenant problems. He founded Landlord Action in 1999, which is widely considered the UK's leading provider of buy-to-let legal advice. He left school at 16 with no formal qualifications. His work ethic, though, ensured that he's never been without a job, from working as a bailiff and tracing agent through to selling Landlord Action in 2017, where he still remains as a director and brand ambassador. He's probably best known to many of you for his hit Channel 5 programme Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, which has been airing over the last few weeks. Very good, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Well done. He's a massive Spurs supporter and boxing enthusiast. So welcome back, Paul. Thanks for being with us. I know you'll be a knockout tonight, as always.
I love it, yes. So thank you very much for having me back. And I've just, news of the press, we've got commissioned a 6 series, so I'll be filming in the next few weeks, most probably the best part of 9-10 months all over the country.
Brilliant.
Helping landlords, dealing with problem tenants, and actually, trying to educate landlords if and when it does go wrong.
Well, I think that's greatly appreciated. It's very much like this show. It's all about getting information out there so people can try and make those decisions. Well, before we wade into what a Bojo government means for the property industry housing, I think we can't really start tonight without dealing with the elephant in the room, which is your take on Westminster in the last roller coaster ride of 48 hours, gentlemen. Russell, what's your thoughts?
I guess that the short answer is, what a bunch of clowns. I think our MPs are doing their constituents, this country, a real disservice, frankly, in terms of their squabbling, their inability to do, as a Brexiteer, as you said in your introduction, to carry out the vote of the majority of the electorate in June 2016. But actually, despite my view, I think no matter what view you have, whether you're a kind of Brexiteer or a Remainer, what we want is our elected representatives is to get on with the job. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm absolutely aghast actually watching these scenes in the House of Commons. The kind of the gameplay, the kind of childishness, really, insofar as what has now become, I think, despite the debate itself, is this kind of paralysis, I guess. And when it comes to people wanting to make decisions, whether they're going to be a buy-to-let landlord that buys more property, whether they're going to they're an individual that wants to buy their first home or their next home, companies and businesses making decisions, we're in limbo land, and it cannot continue. And I personally am really against continuing extensions, which of course has been tabled in the last 24 hours in the House of Commons, because all it's doing is kicking the can down the road. I'm almost of the view, to be honest, that I am a Brexiteer for all sorts of reasons, but I'm almost past caring now what happens. I just want us to get back to normal as a country.
I think most people are.
Sentiment's destroying us.
Yeah. People are just getting fed up with it. I mean, where does it leave the housing market and obviously landlords? I mean, it's the uncertainty. I mean, people are just watching and waiting. The rhetoric that comes from the government with regard to landlords, people just want some messaging and they want to get back to business. And I don't know how long this is going to go on for, and that's the problem. And I think I agree with Russell. We need some sort of definition as to where this is going to happen and what's going to go on.
And I don't think anyone can predict it.
We can't predict what's going to happen in 48 hours time. That's what I'm saying. It's ever changing, and it sucks the life out of you.
It does, yes. I think everyone feels like that. I think everybody feels like. I think before it's been they're treading water, but now I think they feel like they're sinking a little bit as well.
And the planning, you can't plan.
Okay, so Boris's brutal cabinet reshuffle and yesterday's taking of the whip from 21 MPs, which I believe has risen to 25, if not 27, as of a few minutes ago, has made it clear, I believe, that he's not just ruthless but also purposeful. I think that this reflects somewhat in his time as London Mayor, and where he effectively acted as a chairman. He put in place an exceptionally strong team and enabled them to get on with it while he could concentrate on, well, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. But he seemed to have a lot of fun, and certainly appeared City Hall was well ran. That said, the last 48 hours have been monumental in politics. So, gentlemen, can we take this model as indicative, so to speak, as Boris' approach to being PM, as he taken that same model and put it in place, and has that backfired? And is that what we've sort of seen in the last few days, would you say?
Well, I think he's always had a gung-ho approach. He's always had a very good team around him. That's always been said. I think that, you know, when it came to the negotiating side with regard to Europe, I think he had to say that, you know, there has to be some sort of no deal. I just think previously what's happened with Theresa May, we've been in such a weak position. It's quite embarrassing, it was actually, to a certain point. But I mean, his view on housing, you know, I think he was quite supportive of housing and obviously the need for more developments to be...
When he was mayor.
When he was mayor. Yeah. And I spoke to a few people that worked around him and whatever. And I think that hopefully with the people that he's got on board with Esker McVeigh and Robert Jenrick and whatever, I'm hoping that there'll be a bit more positivity than there was with the last housing ministers, because we go through them like hot dinners, don't we?
we have had a few. Yeah, yes. Nearly as many as elections or
yes, most definitely.
General elections.
In fairness, Boris has only been Prime Minister for less than 50 days. Yes, so he's really hardly had a chance to kind of get his feet under the table. The cabinet reshuffle was very ruthless, and I think, look, it's now dominated by Brexiteers, people that you can rely on to have the same kind of ideology as him, and I think that's something he had to do. You know, he didn't get rid of everybody. There are certainly some people in the cabinet, people like Brandon Lewis, for instance, that was a Remain supporter, voted Remain, chairman of the Conservative Party, he's remained a minister, and so on.
And a former housing minister.
One of many. I think they're all ex-housing ministers, aren't they?
Who actually wasn't for client money protection. I tried to call him on that, actually, and he didn't want to bring that in.
I think so. Look, but Boris, look, what a job he's got on his hands. So we're effectively, whether you agree with it or not, we're a kind of a Leave country in a Remain Parliament. He's definitely, I think, a breath of fresh air compared to Theresa May, who I think was, a little embarrassing. And
he's got better hair.
Same hairdresser, I think, perhaps. So, look, you know, I think
he's trying to galvanise the country.
We've got to give him time, and look, he's certainly decisive. He's certainly a conviction politician. So, I think his intentions are to try and get this done. And I don't think he could have been any clearer over the last few weeks, particularly in the campaign for leadership, which is that he said we will leave regardless, one way or the other. October the 31st, you know, do or die, we'll leave. But of course, now he's constrained by that rather inconvenient thing called democracy, which of course, you know, he absolutely should be constrained by. I think the problem, if we're just to get political for a second, is that the likes of Dominic Grieve and, you know, Hammond and Gawke and so on, that have effectively now taken his legs away in terms of taking no deal away, means that effectively the EU can just sit there laughing, knowing that there's no gun to their head anymore. So I think it was really stupid, I think, of those rebels to do what they did yesterday, because now they're taking his negotiating position away.
Well, I don't want to get too bogged down in the 48 hours Brexit and political debate for the hearts and souls of the country.
Bring it back to property.
Let's stick with property. It's far more interesting. So assuming Boris and the Conservatives call an election, and at some stage I think we all agree there probably will be an election, and it's obvious no one can predict for sure the outcome, but let's just say that Conservatives and Boris are returned to power, or something changes in the next 48 hours that means that we carry on and move in some shape or form. I don't know what that is, and I don't think it's possible, but let's say that. If we look at Boris's government at the moment, he's picked Robert Jenrick as the new Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Yeah. Who is he, Paul?
Well, he's his background is he's a corporate solicitor. He even worked at Christie's, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
I don't know whether he was working on the auction side of thing, but he's an MP for Newark, and he's worked in the Treasury departments and worked with Amber Rudd and Grove, and he owns a £1.1 million grade-listed property in Herefordshire. Other than that, I don't know too much about him.
Well, one of the things I do know is he supports garden villages and possibly a new wave of council housing. This is just what we need, isn't it, Russell?
Well, we do, but what we also need is politicians that actually follow through with their announcements. And unfortunately, what we've had, actually not just in the last government, but successive governments going back over the last 40 or 50 years.
Follows through with promises.
Well, it's headlines. Headlines are really easy to grab. So when you're a new Chancellor, a new Prime Minister or a new Housing Minister, of course, to stand up and say, I've now allocated, inverted commas, reallocated X amount of pounds to social housing or to brownfield sites or whatever, it's very, very easy to do that, grab a headline, and then, of course, really not be judged on that 2-3 years down the line, particularly if there are, in effect, as we've said, a housing minister a year. You know that the headline doesn't have to be backed up. So, look, what we need is less rhetoric, less announcements, and more execution. So I don't mean executing politicians, by the way. What I mean by execution is
actually... There's a few would say that as well.
Indeed, but getting on and do it. So announcements are one thing, an actual plan that is deliverable, which we don't see much of from politicians at all, is quite something else. I do think we need to change our political approach to housing, and it needs to cease being so political. And if actually you had political policy being made by people that knew that they were going to be around in that role for 5 years.
Cross-party, taken out of direct party government.
Because it's a political football. It's a political football.
I agree.
And everybody, every single election manifesto, I mean, take Sadiq Khan, bless him. He promised to build 65,000 homes in London a year in his campaign in 2015-16. He has built a fraction of that. Half of that 65,000 was supposed to be affordable, so social housing and so on. That's 32,500 homes. He hasn't built more than 8,000 affordable homes a year since. Boris actually built more affordable housing in 2014-15 compared to 3 years of Sadiq Khan's output. So Boris actually, we're going to talk about Boris again for a sec, was actually a very, very adept and successful mayor on housing. But my point is that Sadiq Khan was quite happy to stand up and throw numbers around, pledges around as he did in 2015-16. He hasn't delivered, and now he's wriggling out of it, blaming everybody else, blaming government, blaming Brexit, blaming the developers. It's not good enough.
No, well, I think unfortunately that is the problem with politicians. They do seem to want to promise the world and deliver very little for whatever reasons. But on that note, we'll go to a break.
Kings Group has been in the high street for nearly 30 years. Agreeing a sale on your property is the easy part. Ensuring it completes and you move is the hard part in today's market. That's why we're here with you every step of the way, and there's no upfront fee. At Kings Group, we are local property experts with a proven track record. Kings have won over 50 Estes Awards for customer service, voted for by you, the public. We have also been awarded the FIFO Gold Service 2018 Award for outstanding service, voted again by our satisfied clients. We are motivated to move you with the minimum fuss in the quickest possible time, while ensuring you are given the personal customer service and advice you deserve. Kings Group, with branch offices across North London, East London, Hertfordshire and Essex. Kings Group offer a special discount of 20% to LGR listeners off all our standard fees. Simply mention LGR's Talking Property for further information. Please call on 01707 872 000 or visit www.kings-group.net. Kings Group, you only pay on results, not promises.
The Kings Group sponsors LGR's Talking Property with Karl Knipe.
Welcome back. Gentlemen, if we look at the makeup of Boris's cabinet here, he's even made space for a junior minister, unusually, in Esther McVey, who is the new housing minister under Jenrick. It's believed, like Johnson, she has a fairly radical views in terms of stamp duty, which we'll come on to in a little while. But do you think that being asked to attend cabinet surely puts her with Jenrick at the forefront of housing and creative ideas?
Well, having two people in cabinet sitting around that table is a good thing, because of course, even though everything's highlighted and overrun by Brexit at the moment, it can only be a positive thing. We know we have a housing shortage. We'll touch on Section 21 later, and she's involved in that consultation. I've been doing quite a lot of work on it, and what she said with regard to Section 21 is basically said we want to hear the evidence. So there is a lot of information that she's just got her feet under the table and stuff, but having two housing ministers on the cabinet can only be a good thing, Carl.
Well, so do we think then that Boris is sort of already acknowledging the importance of housing? Because we all think, obviously, it should be a cornerstone of government these days.
I think because he's had experience as London Mayor, and of course we have a housing shortage, and of course with regard to buy-to-let and obviously renting is such a big thing in London. He's had experience.
Is he making a statement there, Russell?
Well, I think it's a bit odd that he's got the most obvious candidate for housing minister sitting there as an MP in Kevin Hollingray, who is the chairman of Hunters and Estate Agency. And Kevin's a really smart guy. Why on earth he didn't make Kevin Hollingray housing minister, I don't know. Pretty bonkers that he didn't. Now, okay, the point that Esther McVey attends cabinet is fine, but she's not a cabinet minister, so she shouldn't get a voice as such. I think to have a separate housing minister that is just a Secretary of State for housing rather than Jenrick, who is Secretary of State for communities, local government, and goodness knows what else, I think would be a proper statement. I think the point as regards whether housing should be taken seriously by politicians is that absolutely it should be. I think, Brexit notwithstanding, and possibly violent crime, I guess, and particularly in London being a big agenda item, I think housing actually is the next most important thing for the electorate, given that for years and years and years we have faced a housing crisis. There's a deficit. We don't build enough houses. There's not enough social housing. There's not enough houses to rent. There's not enough houses to buy. And actually, I think the solutions are pretty straightforward. So I think the gloss, I guess, of making it look like you're serious about housing, again, back to my earlier point, I suppose, is not the same as actually delivering on it, and that's what they must do.
Okay. Now, Paul and Russell are eager, ready and waiting here in the studio for your questions. Text them here at Talking Property on 0737 66 11033. Message them on Twitter at LGR Talk Property, or email studio@lgr.co.uk to give us your view. Now, I know Esther McVeigh was just stick on her for a moment. She's evoked in the past the spirit of Thatcher by pledging to make the dream of home ownership a reality. And this will play well to the Tory faithful, Paul. But what about Generation Rent? What will they think about it? Will she offer them anything, do you believe?
Well, what, with regard to home ownership?
Well, in some shape or form. I mean,
the thing is, you've got home ownership, affordability, and then of course you've got affordability with regard to renting, and that's obviously where Generation Rent come in. Politically, what's happening with Generation Rent and shelter, and I know this, and I mentioned this in the last show, since 2015 I saw a massive shift towards the tenant across party with regard to, there's over, since 2015 we've had now, and I've got a list now of further consultations. We've got another 8 to do, right? There's been something like over 17 consultations since 2015. I think Grenfell has had a big impact with regard to home safety, and you've just got to watch my programme.
Quite right,
110%. People deserve to live.
But the government's been very
property.
slow to move on this, don't you think?
We have a lack of enforcement, which is a bit. You can bring in as many laws as possible. It's the same with trading standards with dodgy letting agents. It's great, and the vast amount of landlords out there, 1.8, 1.9 landlords, million landlords out there, are good people and want to give good homes to tenants. But of course, rents are high. The average rent in London was £1,675 a month. It's hard, and if a tenant is paying more than a third of their wages, they're going to be in trouble.
I think we've got to make renting attractive, almost as a class of accommodation. I think renting in this country has almost been seen as kind of second best, a second class accommodation, particularly when you've got short tenancy agreements, which of course generally, unless it's a company let, are just 12 months. It doesn't give...
But it's all going to be revamped.
But it needs to be, because for years and years and years you've got tenants really that have got no security of tenure. They've got they're not able to put roots down.
It's finding the balance though, isn't it?
But you look at other countries, particularly in Europe, Germany and so on, people will rent a property, the same one, for 10, 15, 20 years. It's not a stigma. They can then... And it's the difference between a house and a home. So when you buy a property, you turn it into a home. Renters, I think, have houses. Owners have homes. We need to turn that stigma back so that renters actually feel that they are living in a home that they can kind of have security in. And once you've done that, then I think, renting starts to become more desirable. I think what we're also starting to see with the likes of L&G and others is more institutional build to rent now. L&G announced a few weeks ago that they now want to build 15,000 properties a year for rent, because, of course, as a pension provider, it's great. They buy the land, and they build the stuff, they rent them out, and they're getting a guaranteed yield, which then goes nicely back into the pension business. And they give
3-year tenancies as well.
They want longer tenancies. We need much more of that.
It's the experience, and I do seminars all over the country, and I say to landlords, especially self-managed landlords, and there's a question that they should be self-managing, especially when they're working full time and keeping up to legislation. Is you put your price and your time, and yes, your tenant is your customer now. There used to be.
We don't do service very well in this country.
No, exactly. Just coming back from America, the customer service is amazing. Landlords need to up their game. You want a tenant stay in your property as long as possible. You don't want to avoid.
No, not at all.
And agents, of course, they definitely need to up their game.
We'll watch this space until tomorrow. Stamp duty. Only a couple of weeks ago, there was perhaps a mischief-making front-page story run by the Times stating that Chancellor Sajid Javid was considering a change to stamp duty by switching the payment from the buyer to the seller. Seems fair enough, doesn't it, Paul?
Well, I actually think it should be. Look, stamp duty's been there for a long, long time, and of course, with landlords, a few years ago, they put in an extra 3% stamp duty to make it less attractive, especially when we've got 20% of the housing market is PRS, and sometimes the private rental sector is a bit of a sticking plaster for house shortages. I actually think having it split. Why isn't the buyer and the seller splitting?
Controversial.
Well, is that not a no-brainer, Russell?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the benefit of the seller paying stamp duty, I suppose, is that they've earned the profit, haven't they? Generally, so they buy something, have it for 10 years, it's gone up by, let's say, 2.5-3% a year. That's great, so they can afford it, inverted commas. And I think actually in the southeast, although Philip Hammond actually not that long ago introduced a kind of stamp duty holiday on properties up to £300,000 for first-time buyers, which is again sticking plaster really. Actually, by reversing stamp duty into the seller, it does make it easier for people to buy. So that's a good thing. I think what will be very interesting is that Boris, of course, in his leadership campaign, talked about actually reducing the rates of stamp duty.
Yes.
So actually getting rid of stamp duty up to £500,000 was something you said that you would consider doing, and also getting rid of penal stamp duty at the higher end. So, to think that if you buy now a property above £1.5 million, generally in London, and it doesn't buy that much in London these days, the stamp duty rate is 12% plus the 3% if it's a second home. So you're paying up to 15% stamp duty. Boris did say that he would look at that. There was obviously a conversation in a corridor with Sajid Javid where Sajid was kind of half persuaded by the sound of it to kind of also be seen to be considering that. When the Times then printed that story and said, this is going to be great, we're going to see a kind of a readjustment of stamp duty, Sajid Javid has now said, oh no, that's not what I meant. The problem now with that is you've now got the property market, buyers and sellers, buy-to-let landlords and so on, stuck in the headlights because everyone's thinking, well, I don't want to buy or sell yet, just in case I pay stamp duty.
But market conditions, if it's going to stagnate and it needs stimulating...
So we need a budget, or I mean, there's been a spending review announcement today, a little bit of money has been announced for homeless, apparently, but again, nothing about stamp duty. So we can't have this kind of limbo where no one really knows whether it's going to get better for them on a stamp duty basis in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months' time.
Do you think, though, that was he just teasing us? I mean, with a view, this is a political question, I suppose, but it's a question I think that's valid. Has all this been just a tease from the beginning, from the beginning of his 42 days, with a view to a plan to call an election?
Well, it's electioneering, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just promise after promise, because to me it seems promise after promise after promise.
He started electioneering the day after he became Prime Minister because he knew that there was a good chance that one way or the other, whether it was pre-Brexit or post-Brexit, there's going to be an election this year.
Yeah. I think he knew that most.
There's going to be an election this year.
Should he have done that?
What should he have done? What all politicians do, which is to promise the earth and then not deliver.
Yeah,
why
he's
not?
honest,
We're
though,
used to it now. It's fine.
Why change the tradition?
So do we think that obviously we've had the spending review today, but if Conservative government is still in power or re-elected or whatever in November, do we think that we'll see some changes in stamp duty realistically, or do we just think this is another broken promise?
I do think we'll see it because I think George Osborne, when he introduced those excessive stamp duty rates 3-4 years ago, he killed the top end of the London market. He killed it. So I think look, Boris is a much more of a kind of free market aspirational Conservative. So I think Boris actually will want to look. The criticism could be he wants to feather the nest of his mates that are all buying 2, 3, 4, £5 million properties. Maybe not forgetting 125 MPs are landlords. 125 MPs are landlords. So I think there will be a move to cut stamp duty,
but it won't take. It'll be quite some time.
Yeah, but it's counterproductive. The last stamp duty numbers were actually that stamp duty, as in terms of the actual money taken by the Exchequer, recently has gone down because the penal rates that George Osborne introduced have been so crippling. So it's actually become counterproductive and negative for government.
Do we think that's a little stamp duty reduction could be the de-icer that gets the frozen Brexit property market moving again?
Yeah, it could well be, but I just can't see anything happening for quite a while.
Yeah.
We're just everything's consumed with regard to Brexit, and all these consultations, and we're talking about the abolishment of Section 21 shortly, whatever. Everything's parked.
So should homeowners and buyers hold off moving or avoid missing out?
Well, I think there's,
could there be a boom?
There's always something to wait for.
There's always something to wait for, but there's deals. It depends on your area. I know I speak to landlords that are looking to get out, and but people have to be realistic. The game's changed as it was a few years ago. You want to move, you want to change, and whatever. You've got to be realistic with regard to some sort of offer.
Yeah, that's right. And who knows what's going to happen to values over the next 6 months? So you could wait because you want to save £3,000 or £4,000 worth of stamp stamp duty, and that property's gone up. And prices are going up in most
or you can
parts of the country.
negotiate and it might go down.
Yeah. I tell you what, I do think we'll see though. I mean, look, assuming that there's an election, which is likely, assuming that. Let's assume that Boris gets his own way. There's an election, he gets rid of his rebels, gets back into power, delivers Brexit, whether it be no deal or a deal of sorts. I do think we'll see a post-Brexit bounce for the property market. I really do, because I think then confidence is restored, sentiment becomes positive again, and I think Sajid Javid, our new Chancellor, is also pretty smart. And I think the moment they see the economy wobbling, I think you'll see interest rates drop, which I know we're going to talk about. I think you'll see stamp duty drop, but I also think you'll see corporation tax and income tax drop. I think that the government will do everything they can to stimulate and to also encourage external investment and so on. So I actually think we can look forward to, once we've got rid of the mire that we're in right now parliamentarily, that next year could be a decent year.
Okay. And don't forget, you also got a lot of foreign investment, property investment coming into this country. I know I do work with property and education companies or whatever. Our exchange rate, our sterling is really attractive to them.
Exactly.
American money.
There are some countries where properties have just got, over the last 6 months or so, 25% cheaper.
That's attractive.
Okay. Moving on to landlords, what could he do for landlords? I mean, I think the problem is in the landlord section is saying National Landlords Association recently said in a survey only 29% of landlords said their business expectations for the next 3 months were good or very good, the lowest level since a quarterly survey began in 2006. Is this due to the stated abolition of Section 21, Paul, or can you just briefly explain what Section 21 is for our listeners?
Okay, so landlord confidence is low. We did have some good news a couple of days ago. The National Landlord Association and the Residential Landlord Association have now merged.
Yep.
So now we have 80,000 landlord members. I've worked with both organisations for years. There's still many landlords that don't belong to a landlord association. And I would say to the listeners here, if you're a landlord, whether you've got one property or 5 or whatever, is actually join a landlord association for 80 quid a year. It's a complete no-brainer. It's really important to just keep up to speed what's going on. But with regard to the abolition of Section 21, I've been obviously heavily involved in this, and I've been to government meetings. 3 weeks ago I had the government in our office because I was on a consultation, a working group with regard to housing courts. So you can't abolish Section 21. So what happened was they called it non-fault. There's always a fault, there's always a reason why you serve Section 21. Most of the time it's because it's rent arrears. I mean, the RLA, the Residential Landlords Association, they've actually came up with over 80% of landlords are serving Section 21 because of rent arrears. And I had Panorama in my office, and the no fault came from that. And I said to Richard Bilton, the journalist at the time, I said, there's always a reason why you serve it. But it's looking like Section 21 might go, okay, but you can't abolish Section 21 unless you have investment for Ministry of Justice with regard to the court system, because last year there was 21,000 Section 21 cases, there was 22,000 Section 8 cases. You get rid of 21,000 Section 21 cases, you double the Section 8 cases, which means hearing dates, and then what happens is you have a possession order, a money order, and then you go to a lot of these tenants are staying put because they want to be rehoused by the council, and all of a sudden they were going on Section 21 cases and being rehoused, which is a big issue because councils have got nowhere to put people to go, but they have an obligation to rehouse them. And then of course if they see that they've been evicted under Section 8, there's a rent arrears order on it, which means that you've made yourself homeless. We can't help you.
Yeah.
I mean, one London borough has over 25,000 people in its waiting list. So it needs investment. And, I was with, the landlord associations on Monday, and we're trying to map out post what it looks like. But I think the abolishment of Section 21 is one of the biggest things to ever happen to the industry, far bigger than the tenant fee ban, far bigger than...
And one of the biggest mistakes, you think?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes, because what's going to happen is if you don't get this right, and I'm telling you now, and I speak to landlords, and, obviously part of my organisation, we have My Deposits, we have the Property Redress Scheme, Landlord Action, Landlord Zone and whatever. We speak to landlords, confidence is low. Landlords will basically say, as well as all the legislation will say, you know what, I've had enough, I'm out. And that means you serve a notice on the tenant before the law comes in, and the tenant's
evicted. And of course, the way that the media portrays Section 21 is that it was as if you as a tenant that were halfway through your tenancy agreement could be thrown out for no reason, which is simply not true. No. Section 21s are served either after the tenancy expires or in anticipation of it
because
expiring.
The landlord needs to sell the property,
and generally because people aren't
mainly rent arrears. Yeah. But I mean, no landlord wants to evict a tenant. It's the last resort, Carl.
Yeah, they're paying. They don't want void periods, for sure.
They don't want void
But your
periods.
question, Carl, in terms of what the government can do for landlords, I think they can stop kicking them. I mean, honestly, so what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, first of all, we saw the stamp duty land tax penalty, the 3%. Then we saw tax relief reduced, so you can't now claim the same amount of tax relief at a high rate on your mortgage and so on. And then Section 21, as Paul's very well outlined. And what we need to remember, whether they're Conservative politicians or Labour, and let's also, and I think we're going to talk about it later, what John McDonnell announced this week, which
if we can get it in, we will.
Let's get to that, because that scares the life out of me. But
That's
anyway,
just headline.
let's hope they, in my view, never get in.
With a great respect to young John McDonnell, he does announce quite a few things, and then
he does,
changes his mind,
all on the basis that all property is theft. Karl Marx being his kind of favourite person. But look, I think what we need to remember is that landlords underpin the private rental sector, but also a lot of housing benefit tenants, and also the wider economy. And if you start kicking them, frankly, what these landlords are going to do, they're going to exodus, and they're not going to want to invest in property anymore. Instead, they're going to invest in the stock market, gold, foreign property, and so on. And then actually the likes of Shelter, McDonnell, and so on are actually going to have a real problem, because there won't be as many landlords and therefore not as many properties. What are the people that need those properties then
It's most vulnerable people. Most vulnerable.
It's why rent capping is a ludicrous idea, because it has an unintended consequence, which is then to strangle supply.
I don't think that's actually going to come in. But actually, I can tell you now, and from speaking to the National Landlords Association, which is now obviously a merged organisation, a lot of landlords are feeling downtrodden. But what will happen is, if there is an abolishment of Section 21, landlords will reference much more diligently. And the guys at the bottom of the market, they think, oh, hold on a second. And we haven't even touched on universal credit, and you need another show for that. And loads of landlords have exited that marketplace. You're going to have a lot more people that are going to be homeless.
Guys, we've got to go to another break. When we come back, please, we're having a couple of technical problems with our texting, we believe, this evening. But you can also WhatsApp us on 0737 66 11 033. Or direct messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property, or email studio@lgr.co.uk. So that's WhatsApp us on 0737 66 11 033. Away we go for a break.
Karl Knipe on LGR's Talking Property, sponsored by the Kings Group.
Kings Group has been in the high street for nearly 30 years. Agreeing a sale on your property is the easy part. Ensuring it completes and you move is the hard part in today's market. That's why we're here with you every step of the way, and there's no upfront fee. At Kings Group, we are local property experts with a proven track record. Kings have won over 50 Estes Awards for customer service, voted for by you, the public. We have also been awarded the FIFO Gold Service 2018 Award for outstanding service, voted again by our satisfied clients. We are motivated to move you with the minimum fuss in the quickest possible time, while ensuring you are given the personal customer service and advice you deserve. Kings Group, with branch offices across North London, East London, Hertfordshire and Essex. Kings Group offer a special discount of 20% to LGR listeners off all our standard fees. Simply mention LGR's Talking Property for further information. Please call on 01707 872 000 or visit www.kings-group.net. Kings Group, you only pay on results, not promises.
The Kings Group sponsors LGR's Talking Property with Karl Knipe.
Welcome back. Yes, as I said just before we left, we got technical problems with our messaging this evening, so our texting rather. So you can WhatsApp us if you send a message by text. Please change it. WhatsApp it to the same number, 0737 66 11 033. Messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property, or email the studio at lgr.co.uk to give us your view. A question that was put to me to put to you guys was, should a Boris-led government then take another look at abolishing Section 21?
Well, I think they will look at it, hopefully, and that's why
you've had meetings with Estimate.
Well, no, I haven't had meetings with Estimate Bay. So basically, I'm part of. They call it the Fair Possessions Coalition. It sounds like the mafia, but it's not, right? It's all the landlord associations, the property mark, and all the great and the good in the landlord world. And we're working, and David Smith, a solicitor, is doing some really great work. As policy director
on the show
of the RLA. He's visited number 10. It's totally unprecedented in the 25 years I've been involved in this business, and 20 years since I set up Landlord Action, that all the landlord associations are speaking on the same page, and we're working hard because If Section 21 goes, which there is a good possibility, and don't forget, one thing that we haven't mentioned is why is the reason? Well, it is very political. There's 9.5 million voters out there. But let's be clear. Only 12% of tenants get asked to leave on a Section 21. Obviously, the 88% actually make their own choice, and a lot of tenants want to be transient and they want to make their own decision. But no landlord likes to evict a tenant. But having that mechanism, because what's going to happen is Section 8, there's going to be a whole load more grounds. There's 17 grounds at the moment. So selling, moving back in, access, antisocial behaviour, big problem. It only works if you get the court system working, and you need investment for the Ministry of Justice to do that.
Yeah.
You need market confidence.
I wanted to come back to, we briefly just talked about it. It was a piece by Brian McGlennan in the Monday's Express newspaper entitled "John McDonnell Attacks Buy-to-Let Landlords with Plan for Renters to Buy Homes at Discount." Allegedly, John McDonnell has announced a scheme that would allow private tenants the right to buy, he's following Margaret Thatcher, isn't he? The right to buy the home that they live in at a discounted price. The Shadow Chancellor suggested that he would apply Margaret Thatcher's iconic right for council tenants to buy their homes to those who rent properties from millions of private buy-to-let landlords. Russell.
Yeah,
good idea, that,
what a
isn't
wonderful idea. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. So John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn and the like have spent the last 30 or 40 years slating right to buy and how unfair it is. So now to come out with something that actually is not just right to buy, but is worse, because it's effectively what their version is suggesting is that if you are a tenant in a privately rented property that's owned by a landlord like you or like you, Paul, that tenant should have the right to demand to buy that property at a discount. Now, it's one thing doing that at the taxpayer's expense, I suppose. You've lived in your council house 15 years, you get a discount for every year you've been there. I can get my head around that because that's aspirational, as long as you replace the stock, which of course hasn't happened. But,
the government's supporting that to help people.
But for hard-working landlords that maybe have taken all their money out of their pension pot and thought, do you know what, I'll put it into some buy-to-let properties because I think the yield would be better, capital appreciation and so on. And then for Labour to come along with one sweeping scythe just to say, well, actually that £400,000 property, you're now going to have to take £300,000 for it. It's absolutely abhorrent.
It's a complete nonsense. I mean, actually, landlords do sell properties to tenants. The biggest problem is the tenants being able to raise the deposit and getting the finance. Yeah. That's a big problem.
Exactly.
But actually, to make it mandatory, it's a complete and utter nonsense. It's just headline grabbing.
And it's also one step to the nationalisation of all property. I mean, you might think that sounds absolutely outrageous.
More landlords leaving in their droves.
Yeah. And basically saying that, my wife, as an example, is from Slovakia. Before it was freed, if you like, from the grip of the Soviet Union, when you left university and went to work, you got given a flat. Property was nationalised. And look, we all know what happened to communism. It kind of has been proven not to work. So unless we want to become like Venezuela, because that's not working out too well either, we should not pander to these ridiculous extreme left announcements and ideas.
Create a tax problem, wouldn't it? Anyway, surely, I mean...
well, can you imagine if you've got a mortgage on it of 90% loan to value and you're made to sell it for 70% of value?
Another crash is coming. It's
bonkers.
It would just be horrendous.
It's bonkers. So look, I don't know if I've given the impression I don't agree with it, Paul. But
I didn't really get that, actually. But you know what, Russell? I agree with you.
I think it's ludicrous. Yes. And look, then there was rent capping. Do you remember? So Sadiq Khan said a few weeks ago that he wanted to introduce rent capping, although he doesn't have the power to do it, thankfully. And again, I think your point earlier, Paul, was that this is really, it's kind of it's pandering to an audience that you just are trying to get on side. And it's no surprise that Sadiq Khan's up for election, of course, in May.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, on the rent capping side, we heard that this current government, I mean, it's very early days, that they don't have the appetite for it. So I mean, there was a consultation on longer term tenancies, which and that's not really happening. Giving a longer term tenancy, you give a longer term tenancy because it's a business relationship. You prove that you've been a good tenant, a good landlord. It works. You know what? I want you in. It makes sense, but obviously to have some sort of rent caps, it just won't work.
And I think the other problem with scaring away private landlords is that if there was if the public sector, so if the state, if local authorities and government were actually filling the gap with properties that they were overseeing the building and supply of, okay, maybe there's an argument. But of course, you get rid of, what's there, 4 million private rented properties in the UK now? Let's say a million of those are abandoned by landlords. Okay, they go back into the market to be sold. But as Paul makes the point, where are you going to find?
To first-time buyers.
No, where are you going to find the 40 or 50 grand in deposit terms? So you'll end up with an even bigger housing crisis than the one that Labour say that they want to solve. And look, I'm sounding ultra political here, sorry, but this isn't ideology. This is pragmatism. This is practicalities here. You scare those landlords away, big housing crisis.
We got a comment in, and maybe this will lead to a couple of questions. I think it's ludicrous what the government are doing to landlords. Firstly, the tenant fee ban, which has now led to an increase in costs, which the landlord will be looking to recover via inflated rental income.
Correct.
As we were experiencing a stabilised rental market, this is now pushing prices north. The plan for renters to buy homes at discount is again ridiculous. Landlords are not being respected for providing good accommodation to the public who simply cannot afford to buy. That's from Nick, who's a director at MI Homes in Winchmore Hill.
Yeah.
Nick's, I think, just backing up the comments.
He's spot on. He's absolutely spot on with regard to that. I mean, the landlord. I mean, landlords need a bit of love. Right? I know letting agents do as well. Maybe they get it from you, Russell. I'm not sure about that. wait to be seen on that.
I'm famous for giving other agents love.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is landlords give a good service, but there are landlords out there that are naive. They don't know how to manage. They don't know what they have to do and how they need to be compliant. And I say throughout the TV programme and the book that I've written with Kate Faulkner and whatever, use a managing agent, put a price on your time, pay the extra fee. But with regard to the tenant fee ban, I actually thought there should have been some sort of cap, because I worried about a bit of gazumping. But I can tell you now,
a percentage of the monthly rent.
Yeah, exactly. But I can tell you now that
rents have gone up.
Rents have gone up. I'll tell you why, because letting agents, and I train letting agents. I go in there, I train on how to attract more landlords to your business, how to upsell let only to full management. I can tell you now that letting agents are losing 20%, up to 20% of their income, because obviously the tenant, they can't charge a tenant a fee. So what they're doing is they're contacting landlords and saying, unfortunately my price is going up, but to do that I will get you more rent, so I can justify it. Yeah. So actually tenants don't want to pay an upfront fee, but longer term, most probably they're paying more money.
But there was data recently that said, I can't remember if it's HomeLet or one of your organisations, Paul, that actually said that the data shows that already in the last 2 or 3 months, rents are up about, 2.5-3%, which is way more than they normally would be in that period.
I think this was all said, and it was said, no, but even if it does, at least there's clarity there.
Well, the government ignored it because they don't listen to them. They don't listen to the industry.
Well, they don't understand.
They didn't over HIPs. They haven't over this, and I dare say they won't over Section 21. I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see.
We will. Interest rates, gentlemen. What's the next direction of movement, Russell, and why, in your opinion?
I guess back to the point we were.
Is this a crystal ball job again?
Yeah, it is a bit.
Rates are low, as it is.
Well, it depends. So apart from McDonnell and Corbyn, of course, being two of the most dangerous men in Britain, the third one is Mark Carney, of course, our Bank of England governor. So we need to get rid of him as well. I think he's up soon, isn't he? I think he's going back to Canada hopefully soon. I think if the economy needs stimulus, the economy will get stimulus, and it'll have to be with a reduction in rates. Yeah. They can't go down that much more, of course, because they're at 0.75%. So mortgage rates actually now, a bit of a mortgage war going on. Mortgage rates are pretty much at a historic low. So they've got a little bit further to go. I definitely don't see them going up unless inflation kicks off, which it doesn't seem to be. Inflation sitting there at 2-ish%, which is just about within the Bank of England guidance. So we're okay.
But if we had this is my understanding, if we have a no-deal Brexit and import prices went up considerably, that would push inflation up, wouldn't it?
Well, only if people buy those things. If they stop buying them, then the economy will need stimulus, and then interest rates will have to go down.
Would people stop buying them overnight? I don't know.
No, I don't know when it's up. I agree with Russell. I agree with you too much tonight. There's something in the water, I think. So I think
there's plenty of people out there saying we do not agree with Russell,
especially letting agents. But anyway, so I think, and I've spoken to mortgage brokers, I think that interest rates most probably will go down, because I think there needs to be stimulus in a marketplace. I think if I talk in the landlord community, let's think landlords have had cheap money for 12, 13 years. People forget that. You know, they forget it. I remember in my days, many moons ago, when I was an outdoor clerk at the age of 18, I went and I lived in Brighton for a few years, and I used to do mortgage repossession, and the interest rate was 15-16%.
I remember it well.
Carl, you don't look a day over that age.
I remember going out the valuation and it was 10%. I came out of the house and it was 15%.
Exactly, and I used to get the repossession orders, but people have a short memory, you know. So interest rates are really low, and it wouldn't surprise me if interest rates come down. A mortgage broker that I speak to and deal with has actually said he thinks rates will come down further down the line.
They might have to. Yeah. They might have to.
I think the other problem is well, it would appear Europe's entering a recession. The UK's on the brink of one, potentially. China's GDP is slowing, and there's a trade war between China and America. When you add all those factors in, I think it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, governments need to make economies, consumer spending and so on, they need to make those things attractive for sure.
And at the moment, it's uncertainty, it's Brexit, we're in the unknown, and that's not helping.
Yeah, look, Germany's in recession. Latest GDP figures, so they're in recession.
Italy are in debt up to their eyeballs.
They've got a lot of BMWs and Audis to sell us, haven't they?
Yeah.
As if we can get them in the country, eh? But hopefully we will. So the big question is, ultimately, is Boris good for property prices? Is he a pariah? Or will his government carry out Theresa May's destruction of the private rental sector and in doing so keep the property market in the doldrums?
Well, I've got a bit of positivity actually when it comes to Boris from his record with regard to London, with regard to a little bit of noises we've had very, very early on from the housing minister and whatever. So I'm going to be positive. My glass is half full.
Yeah. My glass is actually entirely full. So I think Boris is great, proper conservative, as my old man would have said. And I guess, look, what we should say is Boris versus the alternatives. The alternative in Theresa May, who was a bit of a kind of, damp fish, wouldn't she, let's be honest. Yeah. And the other scary comparison, which is, look, honestly, Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah. If you own property or you ever want to own a property, regardless whether you're a landlord or not.
You want a bit of logic.
Then, you don't want to go down the Marxist route, do you really?
Yeah. I want to ask you one sort of final question before we start to wrap up, guys, because Nigel Lewis wrote in the Negotiator on the 23rd of August that a no-deal Brexit would see house prices fall across the UK for the first 6 months after we left the EU.
Did he say that? He's a nice fella, Nigel Lewis. He's obviously a lunatic.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
But didn't George Osborne say that as well?
Mark Carney and David Cameron.
Yeah. Do we think that or not? I mean, I know this is the problem.
Are you talking about when we officially exit?
When we a no-deal, if we came out with a no-deal Brexit, we'd see property prices fall across the UK for the first 6 months. That presumably due to shock.
I actually think that I think the prices will come down. As to how much, I don't know. I think that's going to create a lot of opportunities as well for people that want to get on the ladder and for landlords as well. This game, landlording's a long-term game. People need to rent.
Well, I think that's a very good.
People need to sleep somewhere.
The two words "long-term" is exactly what it is.
It's not year to year.
It's not year to year.
We've had Project Fear many times, whether it's George Osborne, Mark Carney and so on. George Osborne said house prices would drop by 18%, not on Brexit, but as a consequence of a vote to leave the EU in June 2016, which obviously hasn't happened. Actually, he was 26% wrong because house prices are 8% higher. I think that we've flirted as a country with no-deal Brexit on and off for the last 2 or 3 years. I think the property market has been incredibly resilient. I mean, it really has. Transactions are down a little bit. London's been hurt mainly because of stamp duty rather than Brexit.
London was top end for a long time.
Yeah, and it was growing at 19-20% per annum. So
do you not think prices were pretty much toppy then anyway?
But they haven't come down. Despite, look, we've had...
It's a cycle in that...
But we've had not just Brexit and political paralysis, we've had, threats of change of government and so on. And yet, guaranteed, the next load of numbers that come out for September from the Nationwide, Halifax, Rightmove and so on, I bet they ain't that bad still.
And I think that comes back to the question with regard to the stamp duty question or whatever, is if there does need to be stimulus, they look at doing something like that if there is a no deal.
Yeah.
Guys, now here at Talking Property, we love hearing from you, the listeners, on the subjects we discuss and debate. Thank you for being with us tonight. We always love hearing from you. So if there's subjects you'd like to discuss in the future, programmes, then text us your thoughts. Preferably don't text us this evening. WhatsApp us this evening on 0737 66 11033. And remember, it's your show. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Carl, can I just say you've got an amazing shirt on?
It's a shirt for radio.
I mean, we're not going to go down the face of radio, but you've got your shirt is magnificent. People need to see it on Twitter.
It reminds me of Magnum PI, but the original Magnum PI.
But he's got a few.
in the 80s.
He's got a few buttons undone, hasn't he?
Yes, and that's a chest wig.
That's because it's been so hot being with you guys.
Yeah, God.
And and I mean hot air.
Yeah. Boom, boom.
Yeah. We'll be back on Wednesday, the 2nd of October, which coincidentally will be my birthday, gentlemen.
With another shirt.
Yeah, with another shirt. I'll have my birthday shirt on that night. Yeah.
As long as you haven't got your birthday suit.
No, that definitely needs to keep under wraps these days. All cakes and presents happily received. Yes, we'll be back then with another topical programme from the property world. Who knows, by then we might have left or be in the process of having a general election.
Who knows? No one knows.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Limbo.
Anything could possibly happen in the next 24 hours. So what I wanted to say to you, the listeners, is in the meantime, enjoy September. Barbecue as much as possible before the autumn nights draw in, and grasp each day like it's your last.
Because politically it might be.
We definitely could be. I didn't want to aim that at Boris. Before we go, then, let's leave the Prime Minister, who's hopefully been listening in this evening. Probably not. He's probably been a little bit too busy. But maybe he'll play it back on iPlayer or whatever it is. I'm sure he has. I'm sure with some great advice from Norman Vincent Peale. Mr. Peale said, promises are like crying babies in a theatre. They should be carried out at once. Have a great evening. Enjoy life and be good. See you next time.
LGR's Talking Property was brought to you in association with the Kings Group, your local high street property business that delivers on results and service. We'll get you moving. The views and opinions expressed on LGR's Talking Property are those of the host, guests and contributors, and are not necessarily those of London Greek Radio. While all facts, figures and statistics are carefully researched, listeners should check before taking any action based on information and advice offered in this programme. LGR's Talking Property is presented by Karl Knipe and produced by London Greek Radio.